When I married Daniel 3 years ago, I never imagined the challenges that would come with blending a family. He had a son, Ryan, who was 16 at the time and carried himself with that kind of teenage quietness that makes you wonder what's happening inside his head. At first, Ryan kept his distance from me. He was polite but never really opened up, and I figured that was normal for a teenager who'd been through his parents' divorce. Over time, I tried small gestures to let him know I cared. Making his favorite breakfast, driving him to school when he missed the bus, showing up at his basketball games even when Daniel couldn't make it. Slowly, he warmed up. He started to talk to me in little bursts about school, about his friends, about a video game he liked. But then something shifted. One evening after dinner, I noticed Ryan seemed tense. He pushed his food around his plate without eating, his shoulders hunched. When I asked if something was wrong, he just shook his head and mumbled that he was fine. But mothers, real ones and stepmothers alike, have an instinct. I could see he was holding something in. Later that night, when Daniel was already asleep, I found Ryan sitting in the living room with the TV on, but the volume muted. He looked at me with this mix of frustration and relief, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask the right question. That's when he said, "I've got a problem I don't know how to handle." I sat down across from him and told him he could trust me, that I wouldn't judge or run off to tell his dad unless it was something dangerous. He hesitated, biting his lip the way he always did when he was nervous. Finally, he started talking. His problem wasn't something simple like a bad grade or a fight with a friend. It was bigger, heavier, something that weighed on his self-esteem and his day-to-day life. It was something he felt too embarrassed to talk to his dad about and too scared to bring up with his friends. Ryan explained in halting words, sometimes going quiet for minutes before he could continue. He said he had been getting bullied at school, but not in the usual way. The kids had discovered something personal about him, something he thought he had hidden. He didn't tell me how they found out, but he said they teased him relentlessly, whispering behind his back, leaving notes in his locker, spreading rumors that exaggerated everything. He said it made him feel like a freak, like he was walking around with a sign over his head. He couldn't concentrate in class. He stopped hanging out with friends. He even skipped basketball practice, the one thing he used to love. Listening to him broke my heart. I could see the weight pressing down on him, and I knew this was the kind of problem that, if ignored, could spiral into something much worse. I told him I would help. At first, he resisted, shaking his head and saying it would only make things worse if anyone knew I was involved. But I promised him I'd be discreet. I promised him that sometimes problems only feel too big until you have someone standing beside you to face them. That night was the start of something that would change both of us. Over the next weeks, I helped Ryan in ways I never expected. It wasn't just about confronting the bullying. It was about teaching him to believe in himself again, to see his own worth beyond the whispers of cruel kids. I researched resources, found a counselor at his school he could trust, and gave him strategies to handle the taunts without letting them destroy him. At home, I encouraged him, listened to him without judgment, and reminded him that one problem, no matter how overwhelming it felt, did not define his entire life. There were setbacks. Days when he came home defeated, when he slammed his bedroom door and refused to talk. Nights when I worried I was saying the wrong things or doing too much. But slowly, Ryan began to change. He held his head a little higher, started laughing again at the dinner table, even picked up his basketball one afternoon and asked if I'd play a game with him in the driveway. Daniel eventually noticed the difference too. He asked me one night what had happened, how Ryan had managed to turn things around. I just told him that Ryan had been struggling with something and needed support, and that we were working through it together. Daniel didn't press for details, and I respected Ryan's trust by keeping it between us. But Ryan knew. He knew I had been there when he needed someone most. And that created a bond between us stronger than I ever thought possible. He started calling me Mom one afternoon without even realizing it. I pretended not to notice, but inside, I felt something warm and unshakable settle into place. The truth is, sometimes the biggest problems aren't ones we can fix in a day. They're ones we chip away at slowly, with patience and understanding, until they shrink down to something manageable. And sometimes, all it takes to start that process is knowing someone cares enough to stand beside you.